Yeah.
All right, maybe we should.
Should we start the episode? What an idea. All right. Let me scroll. Jesus. Okay. Welcome back to Unleash the Goats, where we unleash ourselves upon the Star Wars franchise with reckless abandon, and nobody quite knows what we'll say next. Least of all us. I'm Nat, she, her. Angela, say hi.
Hi, I'm Angela / Faye, she, her.
Sugar, say hi.
Hi, I'm Sugar, she, her.
I'm going to pretend that we are recording this on the day it's going out so that I can tell you guys Happy April Fools.
Happy April Fool's Day. Well, it is April Fool's Day for them because they have time traveled.
Yes, they've time traveled.
To be fair, they have not time traveled. We time traveled.
There we go.
That's a
We
good
time
point.
travel to April Fool's Day right now.
We're very on theme. We're going to talk about comic relief characters. Shout out to everyone who has participated in our March Madness on Tumblr. If you are coming here from those polls, I can't tell you whether you voted correctly or not, but I bet you did. Thank you so much for being here.
I bet the person that you were hoping for won.
The person you were hoping for won, and you know these things and we don't because of time travel.
I'll insert here. If you voted for Wrecker or Tech, you didn't vote correctly, and they're not going to win.
They're losing quite badly.
But thank
Yeah.
you
To all
for
of our
participating
great
anyway.
Thank you for participating. You are entitled to your wrong opinions. Welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about comic relief characters and tell you why your faves are either incredible if you have the good opinions or terrible if you have the bad opinions.
If you have a different opinion, that's okay. There's a lot of podcasts out there for those ones.
Yeah, I'm sure there's at least one Bad Batch podcast out there that thinks they're the greatest.
I think I could put it in my phone right now and find 6 of them.
I
I almost guarantee it.
would encourage you not to do that
For all of our sanity.
for all of our sanity. That would be
Now
really
I'm
sad if the
curious.
Bad Batch characters like won and people were like, "Oh, I'll listen to this episode," and then they show up and we're like, "Fuck you, you're terrible."
The first result that comes up is about patients in search of a medical cure, so maybe not.
You know, I like that.
Okay.
Go listen to that instead, guys.
Before we introduce the setup of our episode, we are gonna shout out spoilers. All of the sequels, I think. Probably.
Mostly The Last Jedi, but we'll say the sequels.
Okay. I'm gonna say spoilers for The Phantom Menace specifically. Which, again, I love the idea that people are coming in not having watched anything, because that's how I came into this podcast. Also spoilers for Rebels and Andor. Major spoils for Andor. And the Clone Wars. Am I missing anything? Did we cover it?
I guess the original trilogy for yours, yeah.
Return of the Jedi specifically.
You're right. Okay, we did it. I'm so glad.
Proud of us.
Proud of us.
Do you want me to take this next?
Yeah, would you like to tell us what a comic relief character is?
All right, so I had to figure out what this was when we started researching for this particular episode. We have to start with, what is comic relief? And comic relief is when comedic elements are implied to a tense moment to provide some release from the stress of a scene. So this is when people are having like a really serious discussion and there's a character who kind of always breaks in with some sort of a joke. And it just sort of breaks the tension and allows the characters and you as the audience to breathe a little bit. So then a comic relief character is the character that is primarily in the story to give comic relief, to provide those moments to the narrative. The difference, though, between what I'm calling a comedic character and a comic relief character is that pretty much any character has the possibility of being comedic, of just having funny lines, funny moments, but a comic relief character, that's their primary purpose, is to give that sort of tension-breaking moment. So a comedic character might not always be a comic relief character, but a comic relief character is always going to be comedic. So our example for this was, hopefully everyone watching this has watched the original Mulan from Disney.
The good Mulan.
Spoilers for Mulan.
In fairness, the good Disney Mulan. I actually do really like the 2009 live-action Mulan that was made in China.
Oh, yes, that one is good. I thought
That-
you were about to say the 2019 one, and I was like,
No, no.
sugar.
That was 2020. That was actually
We create a
2020.
new
Okay.
podcast.
No, I believe it's 2009. But yeah, that one was also very good. Anyway, we're talking about the 1998 animated Disney's Mulan, and the characters we chose for this were Yao Ling and Qian Po in sorry, my note says Mushu. In Mulan, our comic relief characters, their primary purpose in that story is to be comic relief. They, there's a scene where Mulan is like struggling through her thoughts and feelings about having to hide who she is, and like the three of them run in naked and cause shenanigans. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
She is bathing in a lake, to be fair. They don't just show up naked. Like, it makes sense in the scene for them to be naked.
Right, exactly. But that's the point, right? Is that like it makes sense for all of them to be naked in the lake at that point, but the fact that the three of them show up and all of a sudden her deep, serious thoughts are sort of interrupted by the shenanigans of having to not be found out, that's what comic relief is. Whereas Mushu, who seems like the much more obvious one, he is comedic, but his primary purpose is to be her guide. That's his role within the narrative, even though he is obviously very funny. And he does provide comic relief. Sometimes it just isn't his main role within the story. At least as interpreted by me. So then we moved on to what makes a good comic relief character. This also took some research on my end. I'm sure there are differing opinions on this. This is kind of coming from about 30 minutes worth of research on the internet and my personal opinions on what I've liked from some of the comic relief characters that most people seem to agree are written well versus what I haven't liked about characters that people seem to agree are written less well. So, for obvious reasons, you want a good contrast and balance between humor and drama. Like, comic relief characters don't exist, for example, in, like, a rom-com. Like, it's comedy pretty much the entire way through. You don't need a comic relief character whose purpose is to, provide comedy. The story is providing the comedy for you. So comic relief characters tend to exist more in somewhat more dramatic films, but that means that you need a good balance between that. You can't have them kind of popping in and giving jokes at places where it's inappropriate. So timing is crucial. The other thing that I found that I thought was kind of interesting in terms of what people have liked about good comic relief characters is that they often are supposed to feel a little bit more fleshed out. Like, they're comic relief and their purpose is to provide that, but they are still a character in the narrative. And so they should still feel like their own unique person. They have maybe a small amount of development over the course of the story. So again, we came back to Yao Ling and Qian Po from 1998 Mulan, where they obviously start off as competitive or aggressive or dismissive of Mulan, obviously when they think she's a man still. But they slowly start to realize that she is someone worthwhile. She's someone that they can consider a friend. They start to respect her. They apologize for their own behavior to the point that, when her identity is revealed to be a woman, they actually are on her side. And at the end of the story, they actually dress up as women based off of her own suggestion to go be a distraction. So you see this development in their characters as they learn humility and respect towards Mulan. And that's part of why they're such beloved characters, is that even though their purpose is to provide that comic relief, they are, still real characters, with their own sort of distinct personalities and stories within the story of Mulan. Comic relief characters, though, can be controversial. So sometimes people hate them. And there's potentially a few reasons for this. One of them is the demographic. Often they can end up aimed a little bit more at a juvenile audience rather than a more older or adult audience. And so maybe a character you thought was real funny when you were 5 or 6 feels a little bit childish and ridiculous and not so funny when you're 25 or older. So you might just grow out of a comic relief character. But also the things that can make a good character, if they don't get done well, perhaps this is why they are hated. So, for example, maybe they're not developed really well, so they don't feel like a fully fleshed out, unique character that you can be invested in. And if the timing and balance is wrong between the drama and the humor, then, you're not going to, feel the good aspects of the comic relief. It just doesn't land well and it ruins the pacing of the scene. And of course, as always, humor can be offensive. So if you kind of look back on it perhaps later or even in the moment and you're like, this humor is in fact like racist, sexist, ableist, any of those, homophobic, probably isn't going to do well for your liking of comic relief character if the humor's offensive. But there are obviously characters people really love. And so the things that can bring us back to them are things like nostalgia. You might grow out of a comic relief character, but you also might continue to love them into adulthood because you loved them as a child. There also are sometimes adult subtext humor involved in some of these, and so a joke that might have gone a little over your head when you were 5 might suddenly be a little bit funnier at 25, kind of as the opposite effect from the things that might make you dislike them. And of course, if they're just a well-written character in general, you're likely to continue to enjoy them as you get older and enjoy them in perhaps a more nuanced way than you did when you were younger. So yeah, that was kind of our idea of what makes good comic relief characters and what can go well and go wrong with comic relief characters. So we are now going to discuss some of our favorite and least favorite examples of this within Star Wars.
Can I go first?
Please go first.
I love that. If you listen to our intro episode or our prequels, I think I was pretty open about it in the prequels. I love Jar Jar Binks. It's something that my partner is continuously upset by.
Jar Jar Binks is underrated.
Yeah. I had a very long discussion with him after I watched The Phantom Menace when I went, hey, I still really love Jar Jar. And he's like, Jar Jar shouldn't be in the film. He's terrible. It's all like in good fun, like humor. Like he doesn't actually feel that strongly, but it's fun to argue about it. Which was delightful for me because I got to go, actually, nothing in the film would have happened if Jar Jar was not there. Which was...
You're so right.
I'm correct.
You're absolutely correct.
I am correct.
The film kind of hinges on him.
It super does. Let me tell you... listeners, let me tell you more about why this film hinges on him. First of all, he is the reason that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were able to get to Naboo and, like, meet Padme. He is then the reason that when they go back to Naboo, Padme has, like, an army to, like, fall back on and, like, fight the Trade Federation. The reason that they win. He then later, he loses some of his huge plot points. In Attack of the Clones, Padme puts him in charge when she, like, goes into hiding. And unfortunately, then Jar Jar is the one who's manipulated into proposing in the Senate that the Chancellor get immediate emergency powers, which is the start of kind of like a turning point for his, like, ascent into power and evilness, which is shitty, but it's not Jar Jar's fault. Because as he shows over and over again, he is not very smart. He's not there to be smart. Like, he shows up and immediately just, like, starts screaming at everything and is so scared of everything. I think the reason that I should, like, really tie this back to Sugar's incredibly in-depth description of it. The reason that he is so funny to me is because, first of all, a lot of it is, like, very physical humor, which is kind of, like, I think that physical humor ages the best. Because it's less likely that you, like, if you're saying a bunch of things, it's really easy to get, like, 20 years later and you're like, that joke really punched down and is not as funny as I thought it was 20 years ago. But him, like, screaming and throwing his hands up and running away at things, in contrast to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon being there, like, handling situations very effectively. The way that Jar Jar, like, he's made a general in the Gungan army and then immediately faints when they say you're a general now. That is so funny to me. He's clearly like, I don't know how to do that.
And they keep the promotion, which is my favorite part. They're like, yeah, he fainted, but he'll be great.
He'll be great. And then they let him go into battle and somehow he survives, even though he's very clumsy and fumbling things the whole time. And so the humor in it is kind of like, how the fuck are you alive? You don't seem to have a lot of, like, not self-protectiveness, What's the word I'm looking for?
Self-preservation?
Self-preservation. He does not have any self-preservation instincts. If you know anything about the Star Wars fandom, you will not be surprised to know that people fucking hate Jar Jar Binks.
So much.
Like a lot. Like so much. And it's very funny to me as someone who is like not really in the fandom to like come in and be like, I love this character with absolutely no baggage to it. Right? Because like I am of the generation that watched the prequels first. And typically the people who like watch the prequels as kids are the ones who still like Jar Jar. Because he was aimed at kids. Adults are the ones who absolutely despise him. Which is sad.
A couple years ago, there was an article that came out, well, that was put up because there was a book that came out like, about the ending of Jar Jar and how he ended up as like a beggar on the streets. And there were articles written that were like, the galaxy breathes a sigh of relief because he died on the streets of poverty. And I was like, that's so mean. He's so nice.
He's very nice. I think that one of the like fun things about him as like a character, and not like, he's obviously there to be funny. He contributes to the plot in ways that he kind of just like falls into it, but he also really showcases everyone else's character. Like when he meets Qui-Gon, you can immediately see Qui-Gon, even though he doesn't have a lot of patience for this bullshit, is still a very kind and caring person that is still going to like take care of him because he's not just going to let this guy die. Padme meets him and is immediately so nice and is the only person who helps him when he gets stuck in the pod racer later. I'm very upset about it. Like 5 people walk past him and Padme is finally the one who helps him. And like in Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan walks in, he's so excited to see Obi-Wan. He's so happy about everything. He's just like very happy-go-lucky and everyone hates him.
I recently watched the arc where Mace and Jar Jar are stuck together on a mission in the Clone Wars. Fucking hilarious.
Fascinating.
But Jar Jar is so nice to Mace. Mace is like fucking up this mission and like not listening to Jar Jar for the first episode because like Mace doesn't understand what's going on. And like he has an arc where he like learns, he figures it out, and he's like fine. But like Jar Jar is so nice, he keeps explaining to him over and over and like, no, you're only here because the queen is my friend and she said I could bring you. You have to listen to what they say. This is my friends. You have to be nice to them. It's great.
Jar Jar's whole, like, he doesn't fuck things up, like, maliciously. Mm-hmm. He's trying his best. He is, like, actively trying to be helpful at all times, which is, like, probably why when he does fuck up, it's funnier, because you're like, he didn't mean to do that. Mm-hmm. He's just clumsy. For all the people who hate Jar Jar, I have a George Lucas quote for you, because you're incorrect about it. He explicitly says, the movies are for children, but the fans don't want to admit that, which is so funny to me. It's a much longer quote, but that's what's important to me.
No, you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
It is for children. I'm not used to being the one talking all the time, so I'm, like, so self-conscious right now. I'm like, I've been talking for more than 2 seconds. That's wild.
Someone, I don't know whose note it was in here. Desperately hope it wasn't mine, because I'm going to look a little silly if it was mine, but put down that he's got very Charlie Chaplin-esque physical humor.
Yes.
Which I think is actually really important to note, especially along your lines of that Jar Jar is never messing up intentionally or maliciously. You know, that he just happens to be clumsy and a little ridiculous. You know, that he's never quite fully aware of what's happening around him, but like somehow manages to stumble into success more often than he doesn't. You know, his moment, obviously, where he puts Palpatine into power politically, you know, I'm not sure his clumsiness would have super helped him there regardless, but, you know, and he also got banished from the Gungan community due to clumsiness, I believe,
yes,
in the first place. So it does land him in trouble, but, like, he survives that battle at the end of The Phantom Menace, primarily due to his clumsiness just kind of working out for him. And I think that that's, like, so interesting to watch sometimes, especially through the idea that this is so much of an homage to Charlie Chaplin, who is remembered very fondly, like, as one of the greats. But I think people weren't maybe making that connection through the homage, but I think that that could be a really interesting way of, like, coming back to it from an adult perspective and realizing that, like, yes, Jar Jar was meant for kids, but he's pulling on Charlie Chaplin to do it, which is where an adult could perhaps find a lot more humor in the physical gags that are there. I think Faye mentioned the Clone Wars arc where he's with Mace. I think one of my favorite ones with him is actually, it often gets overlooked because I believe it's the same arc where Obi-Wan and Anakin end up like handcuffed to Dooku, which is very funny in its own right. But I believe Jar Jar is one of the people who's supposed to be looking for them at the same time, and he's with like a group of clones. And there's a senator who's supposed to be coming with them who dies in like a shuttle crash, and so the clone commander has to figure out how to like complete this mission with Jar Jar as his like primary political leader. Like Jar Jar is ostensibly in charge of this mission now, and Jar Jar can do nothing. And so the clone commander is having to figure out how to like utilize Jar Jar in such a way that it will actually provide successful results. And he manages to somehow catch on to the fact that Jar Jar's genre is Charlie Chaplin and uses this to his own benefit. And he basically, like, there's a bunch of tanks, like droid tanks that show up, and they're like, there's no way we're getting through this. There's like 3 clones and a Jar Jar. And they're like, okay, but like, if we toss Jar Jar at them and just tell Jar Jar, like, you know what you should do? You should try to, like, negotiate with these droids. That somehow all the tanks will end up fucked up, and this is exactly what happens. Like, they just unleash Jar Jar by telling him to go negotiate, and his natural clumsiness, like, fucks up the entire droid contingent. And they're like, chill, let's just keep going. It, like, works out for them. And, like, I believe it's Stone is the name of the commander. Like, Stone is, like, the only one who seems to really pick up on, like, how best to use Jar Jar in this kind of situation, that he's, like, he is not in charge in the sense that, like, you know, he doesn't know fuck all about what's going on. Stone is making most of the choices, but he, like, does it in such a way that Jar Jar never realizes quite what's happening, and it works for all of them. And it's just beautiful. It's one of my favorite arcs in that, you know, you've got a lot of funniness happening with Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin getting stuck together, but I think that this is kind of an underrated funny moment for me, as well as like a pair-up, you know, that this clone commander is like the only person we've really ever seen who knows how to work with Jar Jar just by like realizing that Jar Jar lives in a separate genre from the rest of them.
Jar Jar seems like a character who only rolls nat 1s and nat 20s. Like, he has a rigged dice. That's like half 1s and half 20s. And it's a toss-up. He doesn't know what he's going to get. And either it's going to work out really well for him or real bad.
Yes.
You never know.
You never know.
And the other thing I wanted to add for Jar Jar, too, in relation to what you were saying about how he makes everything go, and that he's very nice, is that also that he is, I believe he is what I've heard referred to as a guide character. So they have to, like, learn to follow and trust in Jar Jar as part of their character arcs, right? Like, Qui-Gon does, more often than Obi-Wan does. Like, Obi-Wan is one who's very questionable about it. But Qui-Gon is the one who intentionally turns around and saves Jar Jar's life down in the Gungan City. And he just kind of keeps, like, going with this. Presumably, he's the reason Jar Jar comes out to Tatooine at all. And, I think that there's this very interesting arc about learning to trust the guide, and that, you know, that the guide often ends up looking kind of like ridiculous and like, why would you follow them? But that's the...
Yeah.
This is a little odd, but I would like to point out that Jar Jar is one of the only people who Anakin talks to about his emotions willingly. Because there's a scene in Attack of the Clones where he tells Jar Jar how he's feeling about Padme not remembering him very well, and Jar Jar like reassures and comforts him. Jar Jar doesn't ask him any questions about it. Anakin just goes up to him and tells him how he's feeling. He hasn't seen him in years, and he's like, here's how I'm feeling right now. He doesn't do that to anybody else.
That's
I
fascinating.
just wanted to point that out.
I do find it very funny that, like, Jar Jar's like, I did not ask for this. Poor Jar Jar's sitting there like, I just came to say hello.
I was coming to say hi to Obi-Wan.
Like, nobody asked for your life story, buddy.
I'm going to write an AU where Anakin relies on Jar Jar instead of Palpatine.
That would be so
That's
funny.
so good. I love that.
Like, he keeps going over to try to visit Padme or something, and like,
Jar Jar's
Padme's just never there, but Jar Jar is. And he's like, well, fuck it, I guess I'll stay. Like,
Yeah.
Palpatine's like, are you coming over? And he's like, no, I can't. I'm busy. We're having an apple eating contest with Jar Jar.
or just like he keeps trying, but Jar Jar's clumsiness just keeps like, fucking up that plan.
Palpatine's out in the hospital every week because of Jar Jar.
Like, Palpatine's like, this cannot keep happening.
Yes.
To be fair, if this happened, Jar Jar would be dead in a week. But like,
It's true.
Listen, Palpatine's dead in all of my AUs, so it's fine. Anyway, before I move on, I think my favorite moment from Jar Jar is in like not the very beginning, but like the beginning of Phantom Menace, where they are leaving Gungan City. They're in the ship. It's Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Jar Jar, who I have lovingly referred to as the J Crew, because Jedis and Jar Jar.
That's so cute.
I just realized that again the other day, and I was like, oh, like J Crew, like that's a thing
Like
already.
The brand, yeah.
The brand. I was like, Past Me was really funny. Anyway, this is what it's like having a terrible fucking memory. Qui-Gon says, like, Obi-Wan is, like, nervous about being in the ship. Qui-Gon says the Force will guide us. They immediately, like, within 2 seconds, lose power to the ship. And Jar Jar's just like, we're gonna die here. And having a character to point out, like, the irony in situations is very fun, especially as a kid. So, he can do no wrong. That's not true. He probably could, like, giving all the power to Palpatine.
He does do wrong, but...
He does do wrong. He's not perfect, but, like, he is funny. And everyone can fight me on that, including my romantic partner, who I love a lot. Square up. Let's go.
I believe there also was supposed to be more of an arc with Jar Jar across the 3 films, but he got such negative response in Phantom Menace that he got really, really minimalized in the other 2 films. And so there isn't a lot of closure on Jar Jar, which is probably why we ended up with a book where he's like a beggar on the streets. Because his character just kind of starts to disappear, especially by Revenge of the Sith. Like, he's really just not there at all.
I think he shows up but doesn't say anything.
Yeah, like he's around, like you can kind of catch him, but I don't know that he's doing anything. He's definitely at the funeral for Padme. I know he's in the funeral for Padme, but like, you know, so are a lot of other people who don't speak. So like, I think there was intended to be a little bit more of like an interesting continued arc about like, you know, Jar Jar being an outsider and being othered by some of the other characters that just never ended up happening.
Which is a shame, because Ahmed Best is a fantastic actor who did not deserve the vitriol he got for playing a character very well. He was great. But, you know, Star Wars fans suck.
Yeah, the thing I want to bring up for Jar Jar is that the one good thing that happened in The Mandalorian Season 3 was this flashback to Order 66 from Grogu's perspective, where they bring Ahmed Best back as Kelleran Beck, who's a Jedi Master from some sort of this like niche children's TV show or game show or something. But what happens in it is that Kelleran Beck manages to grab Grogu and takes him to a ship that is very clearly a Naboo ship.
Oh, that's sweet.
And, like, you could argue, like, oh, well, maybe Padme helped. Padme, in canon, is, like, busy crying over her fascist murdering boy toy at this point in time. And, like, she's just sitting at a window in her nightgown or whatever. Like, there's no way this bitch is sending... Crying. You know, like... You know, she doesn't believe what's happening. She has no idea what's going on when Anakin shows up. Like, there's no way this bitch was sending a ship out to help someone. And I'm fairly certain, because it's Ahmed Best in the role of Kelleran Beck anyway, that the implication is meant to be that, like, somehow the Jedi got through to Jar Jar. Probably through the Naboo embassy or something. That they got through to Jar Jar, and it was Jar Jar who sent a ship to help the Jedi escape.
Maybe they were trying to call Padme, because she is their friend, and she had all of her emails set up to forward to Jar Jar.
She, like, canonically trusts Jar Jar a lot, like, enough to leave and go into hiding and say, you're in charge now. So I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I feel like they probably were, like, trying to reach Naboo, right? And it might have been, like, you know, like, Naboo is the friend. Like, they kind of trust Padme, but I feel like they would have been reaching out to anybody that they thought could help. So they just were reaching out to the embassies, maybe, of the planets, you know, that had people friendly to them, and they managed to reach, you know, Jar Jar at the Naboo embassy. But...
Or maybe Bill called him.
Maybe. I don't know how
Bill,
the
like, dropped in the group chat, like, the one with the 2,000 delegates. He's like, hey, guys, anyone have a spare ship they can send to the temple right now?
Right, yeah. But regardless, I think it's pretty clearly likely intended to be a reference to Jar Jar, just given the inclusion of Ahmed Best in the scene at all. And I just really liked that kind of, like, implied homage to Jar Jar perhaps helping the Jedi out. Because he also has a really positive relationship with the Jedi because of the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
All right, so Natalie is choosing a favorite and a favorite because she did not want to choose a favorite and a least favorite. Faye and I are going to choose one each in an attempt to discuss like ways they didn't work. So I'll start with my least favorite so we can end on a positive note. So I'm choosing Hondo Onaka as my least favorite, which is going to be a radically controversial choice.
I support you.
Thank you. I feel like Hondo is a character who actually starts out as a really good example of a comic relief character when he's first introduced, but who devolves into a very bad example of one, especially by Rebels. I don't think he's a good example of this in Rebels very much either. But Hondo like is introduced as this really interesting character. That same episode with Stone utilizing Jar Jar to take out a tank, Charlie Chaplin style. Really good episode, clearly. But Jar Jar is introduced here as a pirate who, you know, kind of plays off as being less smart than he is in order to kind of catch people off guard. And it works on 3 Jedi. Well, 2 Jedi and a Sith. And, like, this is an insane amount of, like, really intelligent and powerful people for this to have worked on. But he ends up, by the end of the episode, he ends up sort of connecting with Obi-Wan over the fact that they both share a code of honor. Like, this seems to be really important to Hondo for some reason. It's not even entirely clear why, but that he believes that as a pirate he should have a code of honor and that there is an etiquette to this whole pirate thing that he has to live by. And, he's always very disappointed in his prisoners when they are not following this code of etiquette for being prisoners to a pirate and attempting to escape or trick him or something. And so he ends up, though, connecting with Obi-Wan because at the end of it, like, Obi-Wan does kind of best him and he's like, oh, well, you've bested me. Like, are you going to kill me now or something? And Obi-Wan goes, no, like, we're Jedi. We don't do that. You know, like, as long as you don't fuck with us, we're not going to fuck with you. That's our code of honor. And even though their code of honor is not the same, he earns Hondo's respect, and the Jedi as a whole earn Hondo's respect by just having one that they also live by. And I think that that's, like, such an interesting character trait to have and an interesting connection for him, that he's very funny. Obviously, his code of honor is very, like, well, I'm a pirate, so, like, I'm gonna steal things. That's just how this is going to work. I'm gonna take you prisoner. I might torture you. I might drug you. But, like, there is a line there that he is going to draw and that he expects you to draw in return. And you see this continue on through season 2, you know, in particular with the Boba Fett arc that we see where he's working with Aurra Sing. And he actually, like, sees the Jedi ship come onto Florum and decides, like, no, I'm not actually going to fuck with the Jedi. Like, they're here for Aurra. They're here for Boba Fett. Like, they're not here for me. If I don't fuck with them, they're not going to fuck with me. He firmly believes this. And it works out for him. And when Plo Koon, like, brings baby Boba Fett over to Hondo to try and get Hondo to convince Boba to, like, give them information, his argument is like, well, your father would have done the honorable thing, which, given what we know of Jango, is very questionable. But, like, this is what Hondo chooses to pull on. And it works, you know, that, like, he wants to have a positive relationship with the Jedi just because he respects that they have this code of honor. Honor seems to mean quite a lot to him. And he and the Jedi kind of live on this, like, you know, if I don't fuck with you, you know, you won't fuck with me. And, you know, if there is, like, a solid that we can do each other that benefits both of us, we'll find a way to work it. And this usually means, like, if they need Hondo to give them some stolen goods that they're willing to pay for, that he will find a way to get it to them. And we see him do that a couple of times. And I think that this is just such an interesting way to include a comic relief character. Obviously, they do end up on opposite sides occasionally, but it's always with this element of, like, well, yeah, you're a pirate and we're Jedi, so occasionally when you act like a pirate, you might have to act like Jedi and stop you. But, you know, it doesn't mean that we're not still going to come to you for help and trust that you will if it's in your best interest to do so. But then we get to the Gathering arc. And Hondo all of a sudden decides to just randomly decides to attack a ship full of Jedi children to steal from them.
It's so stupid.
It's so
dumb.
stupid. Like, the whole arc is ridiculous. It's not well written. Like, Hondo flip-flops back and forth between characterizations, like, every episode, sometimes between scenes. Like, he's just, like, attacking these children for no reason and expects no consequences to come of this, even though we've seen him refuse to attack Jedi before because they're not after him. you know, and like, yes, he's acting like a pirate, but he clearly does not see it as in his best interest to attack the Jedi like head on when they've got like this kind of beneficial relationship happening. And, you know, later on, like, when God, was it Grievous shows up and captures them, like, he all of a sudden goes like, oh, well, yesterday I didn't like children, but luckily for you, today I do. And it's like just so ridiculous, and it doesn't make any sense. And I get that Hondo, like, seems like a mercurial character, but at the beginning he really isn't. Like, he has a plan, he's got a point, he's got like an idea of where he sits with these people and what he's trying to do with them. I just find it very frustrating that they kind of threw away what characterization he did have and the things that made him an interesting comic relief character for this, you know, and it doesn't even go anywhere, right? Like, he makes this connection with one of the Jedi kids that we never really see followed up on at any point. And I mean, maybe it would have if the show hadn't gotten canceled, but it doesn't really go anywhere. I don't feel like Hondo develops as a character because of it, so I just find it really frustrating that they tossed away this characterization for no obvious reason.
If anything, he devolves.
He devolves. And then you get to Rebels. And in Rebels, he is even more devolved, because that, like, competent, like, generally competent, funny pirate character is basically gone, and he's just, like, this, like, very terrible, like, almost Jar Jar levels of clumsy to the point of being successful kind of incompetence, you know? And he's, like, a smuggler at best. Nobody likes him. He doesn't have a crew anymore. He's not really a pirate captain anymore. He's just kind of wandering around doing random shit and, like, fucking over people's lives as he does so. And there is this element in Rebels that kind of works where they compare him to Ezra, where Ezra realizes, like, this is who I could have become if I stayed on the path I was on before I met the Ghost Crew. That, like, I was also a petty thief. I was selfish, you know, and that this is who I could have become. But then they just keep bringing him back. He just keeps screwing them over, and that seems to be the gag, is like, he's always gonna screw you over, so why do we keep trying to work with him? But that Ezra continues to feel for him because he, like, sees something of himself in Hondo, but then, like, nothing changes. Hondo just keeps continuing to screw them. And he's, like, never all that competent at it. He always kind of fails upward a little bit. And it just seems very annoying. He ends up overutilized in the extreme. He's not that funny anymore. You know, there's an entire episode where he just goes back and forth within, like, 4 times within a scene, you know, about who he's choosing to be loyal to based on what's gonna help him the most in the moment. You know, like, he helps them find some survivors from a genocide, and then the Empire finds them. He turns around and sells them out to the Empire, but then he somehow gets a message back to them saying, by the way, I've just sold you out to the Empire. And then he, like, sells them back again to the Empire, like, yet again. It's just, like, back and forth. And I'm like, I can't figure out what his character even is anymore. He's just, like, this self-serving loner. You know, where was that code of honor? Like, I can't find it anymore. And it's just very sad and kind of frustrating. So that's why he's landed as my least favorite, because I feel like Hondo starts off really interesting, and I just am always very sad and disappointed by how deeply he devolved across his time in Clone Wars and Rebels.
I feel like a lot of times in Clone Wars, they're like, oh, we need someone to fill this role in this story that I've written, so what available characters do I have, and who should I pick from this, with no thought of, like, what the actual characterization for these people are. And it's very frustrating. It happens in Rebels too, I've heard, but I've seen it the most in Clone Wars, because I've seen Clone Wars.
Yeah, Clone Wars definitely does this, especially because of how episodic it is, you know? And Hondo does end up that way, especially later on. Hondo, I think in season 5, just keeps showing up, like, randomly. And I'm like, do you not have any other bounty hunter characters? Like, not one?
They could have picked up, like, anybody. There's, like, a dozen bounty hunters.
They're few and far between. There are no bounty hunters in Star Wars.
It's like, really? Nobody else? Like, anyway. Yeah, he kind of shows up randomly. And I mean, that is kind of how Clone Wars works, right? Like, they're like, oh, we need, like, a smuggler character. Let's just toss in Hondo again. But
I mean, they had the character model for him, which is probably really what it came down to, is they already had a character model built.
Exactly.
Interesting. They were like, he doesn't need to match the character that we've already built. He just looks the same. Mm-hmm. Completely different personality.
Mm-hmm. Basically. I'm fairly certain that's exactly what happened in the Gathering arc. With the little Jedi children that he attacks, is that they were just like, we need someone to attack them. Well, we've got a pirate captain. Let's just toss him in there. And it's like, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't work for his character at all.
Faye, do you want to talk about your favorite or your least favorite first?
I have to talk my favorite first because my least favorite is in comparison to my favorite. So it won't make sense if I talk about it first. So my favorite is the Ewoks. I love the Ewoks so much. They're so cute. I mean, obviously, similar to Natalie, like, I know people derided them when they first came out, but that's because they weren't children. And to children, they're perfect. They're so cute. You could be them. You can dress up as them, and you can be warm on Halloween, which is a very important factor for costumes, especially for children. I like, Sugar has a note here about how there are contradictions between something that looks cute, but it's actually more dangerous than it appears, as a parallel to the rebellion being more dangerous than they appear to the Empire, which is genius. That's, like, exactly what they are. I love that they are both comic relief, but they are also useful to the story, and you have individual Ewoks having huge personalities and like character arcs. There's a pair of Ewoks that are clearly friends multiple times, and then one of them ends up dying, and like the sad noise that their friend makes when it realizes that its friend is dead is so upsetting. I think about it to this day. It's so well done. Like, I don't even remember their characters' names, but I think about those Ewoks constantly. Like, Wicket himself is so cute, and he, like, similar to Jar Jar, he plays a pivotal role in the story. Like, without them, the rebels are screwed. And without Wicket, like, being friends with Leia, the rebels are, like, done. And she's dead. And they're so cute. And the fact that they cut out the Yub Nub song at the end of Return of the Jedi is a crime. It is a crime. I will be mad about it to this day. I know that people like the new one in the revamped version better because, like, more instrumental and, like, what's the word? Triumphant. I don't care. The Yub Nub song was perfect. It exactly captured the energy of the movie about how these are the people who saved everybody's lives. We're feeling joyful. It's a release of tension. It's not about, like, the end of the saga. It's about the end of this horrible battle where all their friends died, and they are letting all their tension and release out tonight. And, like, that's the Yub Nub song. And then you get to the credits, and then you get your triumphal instrumental music. You know, there's a transition there, but you have to finish the characters' emotions out first.
No one listens to the credits.
I listen to the credits. You dance around to the Yub Nub song, the credits roll, and then you line up, put everything up while you listen to the music, and then you're done. It's not hard. The song itself on Spotify is 5 minutes long because the first half is the Yub Nub song, and the rest of it is the triumphal music that plays over the credits because that's the end of the series.
I love that this is on Spotify.
It is on Spotify. It's on 2 of my playlists.
Excellent.
It's fantastic. I love them so much. And I like that they have a really interesting culture. I don't know if you guys know this. They made crappy straight-to-TV movies about the Ewoks. They're on Disney+. They're called Ewok Adventures. I've seen one of them. They're so fun. They're so ridiculous. The one that I watched, a brother and his sister, their parents get kidnapped by a giant thing? I don't know. And they get rescued by Ewoks. And the Ewoks, like, take them in and, like, heal them and stuff. And then they go on a big adventure to go kill the giant and rescue their parents. And it's so cute and so sweet. And that's fantastic. Anyways, I love the Ewoks a lot. And the fact that people don't like them is because they're cowards who can't admit that just because something is cute does not make it not valuable.
Damn. You're so right.
Thank you.
I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because my second pick for favorite, because I have not consumed enough Star Wars content to have a least favorite. And also because I have a terrible fucking memory, and if I didn't like something, it's gone. Forever. I just don't retain that information.
God, I wish that was me.
I'm so sorry. You retain a lot of information for me to benefit from. So you can be like, here's why this is bad. And I'm like, you're right. I agree with you. I won't watch this. My second pick is, I don't know how to say it because I only call him B.
BMO.
But there's a 2.
I always call him B2 Emo because I'm fairly certain that's likely the joke. They call him B in the show, like
they
Marva
do.
And the big guy's name? Cassian, and also the friend? Brasso.
Yeah.
Brasso, I think. They all call him B.
They do.
But his full letter name obviously is B2EMO. I don't know that they ever say his full name aloud.
I don't think they do.
On the show, so I think you can say it however you want. I believe the joke is likely that you would say it B2 Emo.
B2 Emo. Yeah.
Because he's so emotional.
Because he's so emotional. Anyway, he's from Andor, if you did not pick that up. Which, if you haven't watched it, please, for the love of God, go watch it right now. I literally, because it's been a while since I watched Andor, and by a while, I mean like a year, and that's way too long, and I should rewatch. I just, like, scrubbed through and rewatched all of the scenes with B. And
love that.
I did not expect how that went for me. I remember him very differently. Anyway, the first thing I want to point out, did you guys know that you probably did, and I probably did at one point and then forgot, that the actors were working, like, with a robot in real life?
I did know they had a robot. I didn't know that they always worked with one. That's really
It was
cool.
not, like, it's not CGI'd. Like, there's a person remote controlling Bee, like, the whole time.
That makes sense. They've
So
had,
cute.
like, R2 was...
Because they had a robot like that for... R2 was a
R2
person.
is like a person in a
person.
suit.
That's true. Well, he was a person inside the thing, but I think that thing he was in had to be remote controlled.
Right.
I think B8
Yes.
BB-8.
was remote controlled. BB-8, yeah. I think he was remote controlled.
I mean, how could
so
he
they've
not
had robots like that for a while.
I think
but-
what I...
Gonk droids are always just a person in a trash
legs.
can. But yeah, I think they try to have, like, as much as they can, I think they try to have, like, physical robots on there. Like, I mean, obviously one's like K2SO, it's going to be real hard to get a
Right, yeah.
practical version of that. But a lot of them, I think they try, if they can, to have a practical version of the droid around for the actors to react to.
Because then they can bring it out at cons.
Genius. I don't know if it was... I should have fact-checked this, but I'm not going to. But I don't know if it was, like, different because that was the first time that they had, like... To me, it sounded like they were trying this new thing where someone was remote controlling it. Like, they could improv with the robot.
Oh, so it's kind of like a puppet, but a robot.
So it's kind of like a puppet, but it's being remote controlled.
So it doesn't just move.
So it doesn't just move, like, he's... And, like, there are no extra effects to him. Like, everything he does in the show was done, like, when they filmed it. They didn't go back in.
Which makes sense to me a lot with Andor and the philosophy that Andor clearly was living by, with trying to have everything be as realistic and, like what was in the frame was what you saw as possible.
Yeah.
You know, we know that they had a lot of real sets and real location shooting, and that, you know, obviously there was CGI stuff in there, but that they tried to make it as invisible as possible. So it does not shock me that there was a real robot. I might have known that already, but I probably have forgotten it at this point.
Well, now all of our listeners know it, too.
Exactly. It's a really good fun fact.
I
love that. I love him. The first time he shows up in the show, he's like, what's the word for, like, walking? I guess rolling, because he's on wheels. He's rolling down the road. He has, they might be tank type tracks. Anyway, he's rolling down the road.
Like treads?
Yes, thank you. Treads is the word. A bunch of, like, Star Wars space type wild hogs, like, run down the road. And he just, like, shrinks into his little body. His, like, eye kind of disappears. And he looks so scared. And then one stops by him and, like, lifts its leg and pees on him. And he just gets out a little zapper and zaps him. And it's so fucking funny because he looks so scared. And then he's like, oh, you're peeing on me? Actually, fuck you. I hate you. And it's beautiful. Also, my favorite thing is when Cassian, like, in the very first episode, asks him if he can make a lie. And he says, yeah, I can lie. I have adequate power reserves. And Cassian tells him, like, don't tell anyone that you saw me and, like, lie about where I am. And he's like, that's 2 lies. I have to go home and recharge. Which is so funny to me. But then the rest of the show, he's not that funny, which I didn't expect. I remember him being very funny, but maybe that's because I remember being very emotionally attached to him, and it's fascinating to see him be set up in this first episode as kind of there to, like, be a little bit of a joke, and then as the show progresses, you see, like, he speaks with a stutter, which I don't know, maybe you guys can speak to. I don't know if any other robots in Star Wars have done that.
I don't think so.
Star Wars is 100% on board with, like, they have never pretended to have perfect robots.
Oh, it's in, like, they're broken down sometimes?
No, like, just the droids are never, like, emotionless, robotic. Like, C-3PO is a bitch, and it's awesome. Like,
and anxious all the time. He's also scared about everything and paranoid.
Yes, and R2 is also very sassy, and so it's never, like, they never give the impression that these robots are, like, the end-all, be-all, like, a droid is the ultimate, like, form of being here. They know everything. They are, like, capable of everything. Like, there are imperfections in every single one, but, like, something about the stutter makes him seem even more, like, I don't want to say human because we're talking about Star Wars, but like a person, I guess, is the way you would say that.
There is another droid with a stutter in Rise of Skywalker, but it's Rise of Skywalker.
So that's not canon.
Oh, is it Dio? Does Dio have one?
Yeah.
I just watched this, 2 months ago? I should have remembered that.
Your brain did what my brain does and got rid of it. Said you didn't
Yeah.
like this. You don't have to keep it.
I know.
My brain just retains all information. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, I've been relying on Faye to give me sequels information for years now. I clearly am just going back to status quo here.
Honestly, I should do a rewatch of the sequels, even though I hate them. I should rewatch them again, just so I hate them properly.
Okay. Have fun. I can't wait for you to tell us how much you hate them. Anyway, B. I get very attached to small robots. He is treated like one of, I just had a moment where I was like, do they refer to B as he? I think they do.
I think they do. They do put pronouns on the droids.
They do, but I couldn't
Definitely
remember if the
pronouns.
pronoun was he or if I just said you're just a little guy and so you're a he him.
He's a little guy.
He's just a little guy. He's part of their family. Like, when Cassian comes home, he greets Marva and B every time. Like, B is a part of conversations. When in the flashbacks to when Marva and Clem, like, pick up Cassian, B is also there. Like, he's always been a part of it. He just reacts to people like a dog. He gets really excited when Cassian shows up. When Brasso says, after, spoilers for Andor, after Marva dies, when Brasso comes back in and says, like, she's not here anymore, B asks him to stay the night, and he says, okay, I'll stay one night. And B, like his whole body, like, extends. He, like, perks up and comes out of his little charging thing and, like, comes over. And that's the whole interaction, but it's so beautiful. He is leading the fucking funeral procession, which makes sense because then he, like, projects Marva's, like, final message. But he's leading it, and I'm going to take that very personally and emotionally. The thing that I was surprised by in my scrubbing through and watching only his scenes is that he's there for comic relief, but it's such an intense show that his humor is very, like, downplayed. Like, Marva and Cassian have this conversation where Cassian is trying to say, like, we have to run away. I have the credits to run away now. Please leave. And they're, like, she's arguing with him about it. And B in the corner is like, can I speak now? And Marva just really aggressively is like, no, and shuts him down, which is very funny, but in kind of a super sad way, which I think makes a lot of sense with how intense Andor is. And I love that they kind of, like, I got to the point where I was like, would we even classify this as a comic relief character at this point? You are just, like, a full character in the show.
I think that kind of plays to, like, what I was saying before, that, like, a good comic relief character should, in many ways, be just yet another character. And if you don't care about them in that way, then in some ways they're not as good of a comic relief character. You know, even in the sense of the Ewoks, like, the Ewoks do play a part in the narrative. It's sad when one of them dies, you know, and I think that B has a similar effect. And I mean, yes, it is a show for adults, and so I think the comic relief with B looks a little bit different than it does in Return of the Jedi, where the whole movie is aimed still at children.
Mm-hmm.
And so his humor is a little darker sometimes, a little more downplayed, but I feel like he counts. I'm not sure there's anyone else who counts as comic relief in this fucking show.
Right. I think he has a, like, even when he is not being funny, I feel like he plays that role of cutting through the tension of, like, that intensity, but in a way that doesn't detract from it because you do care about him as a character. Not to throw shade at Marvel, but I'm going to.
Do it.
They do this thing where every single time there's an intense moment, regardless of what character is there, they have to make a dumb fucking joke. We can't sit in that tension for any amount of time. They're like, oh, we can't be a serious movie. Like, no one can take us seriously. We have to be funny. We're all going to tell the same, like, witty one-liners, even though we're different characters. That doesn't work. Like, that sucks. It pulls you out of it, and it makes you not care about what's happening. But with B, every single moment, you're like, you are a part of this story. And this is a really intense story, so you're not making me, like, it's not like Jar Jar, where you're like, that's fucking dumb. I'm laughing at it because, like, this feels low. Like, him getting stuck in the pod racer, like, that's so low stakes. He's not gonna die. But
Yeah.
you don't have that, like, every moment of Andor is filled with, like, incredibly high stakes. And so you can't really do that.
They keep his humor very tonally consistent with the rest of the show. And I feel like that is something that, like you were saying with Marvel, like, they have the exact same jokes for every movie, even though every movie is trying to strike a different tone. And so the jokes feel out of place. Whereas I feel like for a lot of these Star Wars characters, they do a pretty good job for keeping them tonally consistent with the movie that they are in. So, like, BMO would not work in a different movie like Rebels because it wouldn't work at all. He's, like, completely different tonally to Rebels. But he works perfectly in Andor. But if you stuck Jar Jar in Andor, it would not work. He would be completely wrong for that story.
Agreed. Yeah, he's very sweet, you know, and I think he has that element from some of these other characters we've brought up, not Hondo necessarily, but the Ewoks and Jar Jar, definitely, where they have that kind of sweet innocence to them. You know, that helps, I think, with that tension breaking, because you know that you're getting that perspective from them of, like, maybe not entirely understanding what's happening, and reacting to it from that perspective that allows the tension to break a little bit. But it also sometimes has the ability to, like, hit the feels even harder sometimes, right? Like, you know, when Brasso is trying to convince B to leave after Marva's died, and B is kind of just, like, refusing, and he's going, like, you know, I don't want to leave, I want Marva. And it's like he's never going to get Marva back, and the pain of knowing that he never is going to see her again. And some part of B understands this, but he can't quite compute it yet. You know, he can't quite acknowledge or accept it yet. And I think in this way, too, in some ways, B works as, like, a representation of Cassian, like the piece of Cassian that he can't really be anymore, the child that was lost on that planet, whose name I can't remember, but that he got taken from when Marva showed up. But that child that was lost when Marva took him away, you know, that, like, this, you know, some part of Cassian is going to feel like this too, and does feel like this too, kind of, when he gets the news that Marva's dead. You can see it on his face that he just blanks. You know, he can't quite compute it. It's so emotionally devastating, and I think that it's really interesting to use B as this, like, counterpoint to Cassian, this innocence that is lost in Cassian, but that B2 really can't grow out of, because that's just not how droids work.
Yeah.
And so it really is emotional, but it allows us to understand the character differently, and I think it allows for some of these moments where it breaks the tension a little. The other thing I like about B quite a lot is that it's the harm to B that sparks the rebellion on Ferrix.
Yes. I just got chills thinking about it.
Yeah, like, they're all kind of standing firm right up until the officer kicks B and knocks him over, and then Brasso's like, you know what, fuck you,
Yeah.
Brick to the face, you know? Like,
It's beautiful.
yeah, it's the harm to that innocence, you know, that jolts them into action for once and finally. And I think that just B plays such an interesting role in Andor, and I really love that you brought him up as this kind of almost more adult version of what comic relief might look like.
I contain multitudes. I can love B and also Jar Jar.
Exactly. Like, face it, you know, they work better in their respective stories, but they are, like, really good examples, you know.
The depth, the range of comic relief.
Exactly.
Sugar, do you want to talk about your favorite comic relief character?
All right, so much like Nat, I do have more than one, but we are more than one favorite, but we decided to move away and pick one that I thought was perhaps less well known, underappreciated, undervalued, underrated. So for those of you who have not seen Rebels, this is going to be a completely unknown character. He exists only there. If you have seen Rebels, I won't be shocked if you don't remember him. He's pretty minor. But I found him, especially on my second watch through. I don't think I thought very much of him the first time I went through Rebels, but I watched it again a second time and was kind of amazed at what they ended up doing with this character. And this is Sakatro Vizago, whose first name I have to look up every time I talk about him because I never remember his first name. They never talk about it. Like, they call him Vizago. So I will call him Vizago for the rest of this. Vizago starts off in season 1 as a minor antagonist. Like, obviously, the major antagonist is the Grand Inquisitor, and just the Empire itself. Like, Tarkin shows up at some point towards the end. Vizago kind of is there as just, like, this dude they have to deal with. He's not unlike Hondo. He seems kind of vaguely pirate-like, a little smugglery. He seems to have a crew of some kind, and basically, like, he gives them some resources. Like, he'll give the Ghost Crew resources if they give him something in return. So they'll, like, steal some guns to give him, and he'll pay them the money that they need to, like, get gas, and get food in return. And he's just kind of like a minor annoyance because, like, he is violent, and they don't really want to encourage that, but they are in hiding. They're working against the Empire. They're rebels. They don't have the resources to be picky about who they work with. And so Vizago is just this sort of necessary evil. He's not necessarily any worse or anywhere near the level of evil that is the Empire, but, like, if they didn't have to work with him, they'd rather not to. But then right at the end of the season, and again, major spoilers for Rebels here, but the end of season 1, Kanan gets captured, and they really don't know exactly where Kanan has been taken, and Ezra decides to make a deal with Vizago by revealing that he, in fact, is a Jedi, which is something that they've been keeping very secret, because obviously that information in the wrong hands could be devastating. And so he has to trust that Vizago isn't going to utilize this particularly heinously and give him away to the Empire. But, like, even if he does, he has to make the decision that that sacrifice is worth getting the possibility of getting Kanan back. So he makes this deal that, like, a Jedi will owe Vizago a favor if Vizago gives him information on Kanan. And Vizago takes the deal, and they get Kanan back, and then we don't hear from him again for a little bit until, like, season 2, where Hondo actually shows up in this as well, but Vizago basically calls in the favor, and it is basically just like, help me get my shit back from this, no good idiot over here, effectively. Like they've been worrying since season 1 about what this favor was going to be and what Ezra was going to be asked to do by someone like Vizago, and it turns out to be the most minor of things. It's like, help me get my fucking shit back from one guy who's not even that big of a problem. And, like, he comes back every so often, and every time he comes back, he's, like, more of an ally and more of a friend. He ends up getting left behind in, like, a prison camp, effectively, on Lothal one time. He helps them, like, get onto Lothal and gets left behind by the Ghost Crew. And he ends up getting sent to a prison camp by the Empire. And they come back again in season 4, and they finally find him, and he's like, I knew you'd come back! And, like, they're not there for him at all. Like, they're completely shocked to find him there. Like, and they're sitting there going, like,
Oh.
yes, we did, we came back for you! And he figures out eventually that they absolutely are not here for him. And, like, he helps them anyway. Like, he figures out they're not here for him, and not only does he not hold it against them, but he continues to fight with them until the end of the season. He goes up against the Empire for them, and he's, like, basically totally turned himself around into this rebel that is, like, more trustworthy than many of the other allies they've picked up. And, like, he is, like, so he kind of starts off as a minor antagonist, but becomes this really interesting comic relief character who has a whole ass little redemption arc happening behind the scenes. And I just adore him because he ends up kind of sweet and funny by the end. He's like, he has no resources and no ability to help to hurt anybody. He's not a captain of anything. He has no smuggling crew, no weapons. He's just, like, stuck. And, has to kind of learn to rely on these people and realize, everybody makes mistakes, right? Yeah, they left me here. They didn't come back for me, but, like, fuck it, They're doing their best.
They're still here to help him,
Exactly. Like, they do ultimately help him, but it's kind of like, well, we happen to be here anyway, so we might as well help break you out. Anyway, I have a lot of kind of love for Vizago as this character that I kind of was not anticipating, and personally, I think that Vizago has one of the better redemption arcs in Star Wars overall. Fuck Kallus. Kallus is the worst. So it's not like Rebels does this particularly well across the board. They just happened to sort of accidentally wander into this with Vizago and screwed the pooch as well as it could possibly have been done with Kallus. But that's a story for another day. We'll talk about Kallus some other time, probably.
I love not knowing who you're talking about.
Okay, my least favorite side character is once again a group. It's the Porgs. I understand that when they were filming on Octu, their location for Octu, which I think was in Ireland, I know that they had puffins on the island, and they're like, we don't want to spend half of our budget removing these puffins from all of our shots. So let's just make a Star Wars creature that these things are. Great. Genius. Love it. Where I hate it is that they were like, okay, now we're going to make them our funny little sidekick people. But we're not going to make them important characters. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to have any development. They're not going to grow as people. They're just like funny little squeaky toys. That is the only thing Chewie gets to interact with, because we're also not going to write anything for Chewie to do. And it annoys me so much. Like, they're knockoff Ewoks in that they're funny, cute, and small, and they could sell toys of them. But they don't actually get to do anything like the Ewoks do. They're not important to the story. They're not relevant to anything. They're just there for merch purposes, like the cute little crystal foxes later in the movie too, in The Last Jedi.
At least the crystal foxes like lead them out of the cave at the end.
That's a good point. The crystal foxes do more for the story than the puffins do. Like, you guys had an opportunity with these cute little things to like do something fun with them, like have them be cool. Like, they could have led them out of the cave. Like, they could have figured out a way, could have done anything. But instead of how cool the Ewoks are, where they actually are relevant to the story, they bond with people, they have interesting arcs. No, they just show up, look at Chewie so he feels guilty about eating one of them when he should be eating all of them. Honestly, they seem like they're a plague on that island. He should eat more of them. He shouldn't feel guilty. He's a carnivore. He's used to looking at his food while he eats it. Don't try to tell me that Chewie feels bad about eating a penguin. I won't believe it. Anyways, I hate the Porgs. They're stupid. I do own a stuffed one of them, and it's very, very cute. They are adorable. It's just, there's such wasted potential, which I know is what we say about the sequels all the time, but it's true, and it drives me crazy.
It's like, this exists to be a cute stuffed animal, but don't pretend it's a character. Like, you could have just made this
and they
stuffed
make
animal.
such a good stuffed animal.
Yeah.
They do. They're very adorable. If they were more plot relevant, I would actually like them, but they're not. Hold on, I think I have one right here, actually. Look. Yeah, how cute
Okay,
he is.
it's so
He's
cute.
so adorable. Adorable. If only you were plot relevant.
Gross. Is there a scene where Rey is explaining what the Porgs are to someone?
No.
There is a scene where I think Daisy Ridley is explaining the Porgs to somebody.
So an interview.
Yeah.
No, but it's okay. So sometimes when you consume things through Tumblr the way that I do, sometimes people put captions on GIFs that aren't really what people are saying, and I just don't know if it's real or not.
It might have come from an interview too, if you're looking at a
That's
caption.
true.
I'm not sure what it is you're looking at, but
I don't either. If I find it again, I'll send it to you and be like, this thing. It also might have been fan art. Like, I have no idea. I thought maybe they played a part in, like, one scene, but apparently
no,
not.
because they stay on the Millennium Falcon pretty much the entire, like, they're on Octo, and then a couple of them end up in the Millennium Falcon when they
my
leave
God.
Octo.
A plague.
To bother
An
Chewie.
invasive
Yeah.
species.
All right.
I think they end up, like, eating some wires or something.
Maybe, yes, and I think it makes life a little difficult, but, like, it's mostly there for humorous purposes. It doesn't seem to cause any genuine problems, at least not for long. And, like, the only person who
Because
makes
they're
it
bad
off
comic
the
books.
Falcon is Rey, and she just comes out to do the rock lifting thing. The Porgs do not seem to come with her, and then they go back. Everyone gets on the Falcon for about 2 seconds, and then the film is done.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they kind of disappear.
I think maybe someone is holding one in, like, the scene where you see everybody, like, sitting
Yeah,
on the ground.
maybe. And then they mostly seem to disappear by Rise of Skywalker. I don't know that they're really... Like, they might show up again on Octo when Rey goes back to Octo, but I don't know that they're, like, wandering around the Rebel camp or anything.
They were not memorable if they were.
Right, so...
Can you imagine them with, like, little, like, you know how Chewie has the sash?
You
Like,
want to
little
give them
tiny
little Rebel
sashes
outfits?
and a little tiny gun. It'd be so cute.
What they should have done is they should have had the Porgs, like, train them as little scouts.
Yeah.
And they should have, like, gone ahead with little cameras attached to their head and, like, gone ahead and then come back to, like,
Little
report.
spies.
That would be so cute.
Wow, we're so much better at the sequels.
We're so much better at the sequels.
Not
We should
hard.
write them. That's true. It's not hard. Would you guys like a goat fact to close us out this evening?
Yes,
if there's nothing
please.
else we want to talk about.
Yes.
Okay. Goats prefer happy faces. In an experiment published by the Royal Society Open Science, researchers put photos on the wall at a ghost sanctuary of the same face, a happy one and an angry one. Goats avoided the angry faces, and they approached the happy ones and explored them with their snouts.
That's so cute.
I know. It's really cute.
I love that.
Goats prefer happy faces because goats are cheerful.
I love that. I don't have a joke to make on top of it. I just like it. Our intro and outro music is Mos Eisley Cantina by Speedkicks. Angela and I edit, our artwork is by me, and Sugar is our writer and researcher. You can find us on Instagram and Tumblr at Unleash the Goats. Thanks for listening.